negativity and then let all the positivity slide. I'll let you kind of describe that concept and how that impacts how we feel.
Yeah, this is another fact that I love sharing with clients because it just makes them be less hard on themselves because they have so many negative thoughts. So our brain was built to have positive thoughts be like Teflon and negative thoughts be like Velcro. And it is this way because we need to know which information is going to kill us or keep us alive, right? That's the important stuff. So when I think about back to the times when we were first wandering around, grazing, killing animals, just trying to survive, whether you knew where and when the strawberries bloomed in the spring wasn't going to be a huge deal. It's like an extra treat. To know which mushroom is going to kill you, that's going to be life or death knowledge, right? So the people who had the thoughts that were like, oh, remember the bad stuff, they're the ones who lived. Just natural selection, the people who are like, oh, I don't need to remember that. Oh, Sally died. I don't remember what she just ate. Don't worry about it. It's fine. She probably, right? Those people were kind of selected out of the gene pool. So we are the product of the people who saw this stuff and noted and really remembered and kept bringing back into their brains the stuff that could kill us. So if it's dangerous, we need to know that to survive. Now, the problem is we're in a society where most of the stuff is not dangerous. We are no longer, for the most part, on a constant survival basis. But we take all this information, and because we are geared toward negative, it frequently moves that. Where's the potential danger there? There's got to be some danger. What about this could hurt me? So we just naturally go to the negative because it's kept us alive in the past. Now it makes us depressed and anxious.
So how do we, with an understanding of how we evolved and how our brain evolved, how do we make positivity more like Velcro and negativity more like Teflon? And when I say that, it's like, if you're in a job and you get feedback from your boss, you did a terrible job on this report. Oh my gosh, there were so many mistakes, blah, 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 blah. And this is like this track that's running through your head. It's the Velcro. Yeah. But then along the way, you were given all these compliments about what an important contribution you make to the team, blah, blah, blah. But that's just kind of slid away. Mm-hmm. Do you have ideas or strategies for how we can kind of switch things a little bit so that we can be happier and less anxious?
Yeah. The good news is that the Velcro Teflon just naturally developed to keep us alive. But the brain is so malleable now, we know, that if you want to change your brain, you change your habitual thinking. You just consciously choose what you want to think. And I just listened to a podcast have you heard of the Hubermann Lab Podcast?
I have not.
The dude's a serious overachiever. If you love brain stuff, you will love it. He's a neuroscience and ophthalmology professor. I think maybe Stanford. I can't quite remember. But he did a whole podcast on gratitude. And he looked at all the literature on gratitude. And he said, while most of us learn gratitude, which is a super powerful practice, right? It literally shifts our brain cells into making gratitude more Velcro. But he said, while most of us do lists, or in my case, I like feeling because I'm less critical of feelings. I can critique my list like, really, Jane, you put cats on the third day in a row. Don't you have something else to be great? Like that. I'm a perfectionist. I critique things. But what he said is that the studies that had people either remember a story of someone appreciating them, or even if they heard a story of somebody appreciating somebody else, that stuck the gratitude in their brains more. It made it more Velcro-like. And the studies were from anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, anywhere from once a week to 5 times a week. Like all of them showed more Velcro for gratitude. And he didn't say this, but here's my theory. Let me give you an example. So I was sharing this with a client and he said, oh, I just read a story in the newspaper today. It was a guy who'd survived World War II. He was Jewish. And there was a maid who worked for like the equivalent of a major in the Nazi military. She was working for Nazi, right? She saved 50 Jews in either a basement or a bomb shelter. She saved 50 people's lives. So this guy was telling the story of how she became like a second mother to him. And then he said, and then the major found out. And then he became like a second father to me. I like even telling it now, I'm getting chills down my body of just the gratitude this guy must feel and the sheer courage of these two people to save 50 people's lives. And I told that story like 10 times since I've heard it. And I think that gratitude is the vehicle, but connection is what really happens when we hear these stories. Like when somebody says, I felt so happy when you left that thing of chocolates on my door. What a wonderful thing to do. Thank you so much. Thank you for thinking about me. I love chocolates, right? We feel the connection. And as human beings, we are here to connect. We're not here to be all by ourselves. We can do it, but we don't thrive that way. So the connection makes us feel safer in the world. And I think that's why the stories of gratitude really hardwire into our brains.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that and come up with a recommendation for listeners that had never really occurred to me until now, until you just talked about that and the power of story and the power of gratitude and the power of emotions. So I'm a big fan of Jack Canfield and Carol Klein, who helped with all the writing and storytelling for all the Chicken Soup for the Soul stories.
Oh.
She actually authored Chicken Soup for the Pet Lover's Soul. And she's been on this podcast and she's wonderful. I think just before bed, because we talk about the suggestibility of right before bed, you can't just go directly into Delta. You go through your beta and your alpha and your theta and then into Delta, into sleep. But right before going to bed, I'm going to go back to doing this, Dr. Jane.
Yes.
I used to read those stories, like the Pet Lover's Soul stories or the Chicken Soup for the Soul stories. And they did really help with that whole process of feeling those good emotions. What I didn't know until now is that it doesn't have to be first person, that it can be a third person story that can really help. There's also a book that Carol recommended to me. It's called The Compassion Instinct. And it's just stories of soldiers, for example, that, had that like dead on shot and they just decided not to pull the trigger and things like that. And the compassion that we feel for animals and things like that. It's just a great idea, folks, to not go all the way up until the point where you're going to sleep and fill up your day and your schedule and your brain with work, with stress, with to-do lists, with violent TV, with depressing news, but instead use the power of story. I mean, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, I used to always say to my grandma, I would say, tell me a story. I remember just lying in bed. It was my most exciting thing.
Right.
My mom and dad couldn't always do it, right? Like they just, because she would come up with some original story. And I just love that. And it was the power of that story. And it didn't have to be about me, right? It just had to be a story. And then I would just fall asleep blissfully. So maybe all of us could try that.
It's an awesome habit. And here's why it's especially powerful. Because your brain, while we're sleeping, kind of like categorizes and files and figures out and makes sense of all our information from the day. So if you're, Hebb's law, neurons that fire together, wire together. If you go into sleep with gratitude, thinking gratitude and connection and the world's a good place and yay, there are all sorts of good things. Because those neurons are firing as you're going into sleep, the memories for the day will also be fired with that connection and gratitude and good feelings. So the memories themselves will kind of like, because those neurons are firing, they will kind of morph into, gosh, that was a really hard day, but look at that person really helped, or that person gave me comfort. So we will fire this connection, this gratitude, this good feeling as we sort the days and file the day's memories in our brain. So literally we shift how we experienced how we remember the day.
I love that. That good old hippocampus that's working all night. Like, why not file things in the good category? And maybe that's also going back to that point of Velcro and Teflon, that maybe that's another sort of biohack that we can do so that we become more like positivity and Velcro. I love it.
Yeah.
There's another wonderful tip that I read in your book. Again, it was, folks, I really recommend this book because it's only a little bit over 50 pages. It's a really short book. It might be a great thing to read before you go to bed, right? I think that's what I did. But there's so much in it. There's so much wisdom in the book.